The arrival that changed everything. Victoria Hayes stood in the marble-tiled lobby of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel. Her rolling suitcase balanced perfectly beside her designer pumps. After 3 hours of traffic and a delayed flight, all she wanted was a hot shower and a quiet evening to prepare for tomorrow's crucial marketing conference. She checked her phone one more time, confirming the reservation details her company had arranged weeks ago. Room 512, everything seemed perfectly in order. Just as she preferred, the elevator ride to the 5th floor felt endless, her mind already running through the presentation she would be supporting tomorrow. Daniel Foster, her boss, and the brilliant CEO of Apex Marketing Solutions would be delivering the keynote speech. Victoria had spent weeks ensuring every detail was flawless. Every slide perfectly timed, every backup plan thoroughly considered. That was her specialty, anticipating needs before they arose, maintaining order in the chaos of a rapidly growing company. The door that opened to chaos, she approached room 512 with practiced efficiency, sliding the keycard into the slot. The light turned green with a satisfying click. Victoria pushed the door open, already planning her evening routine, and then froze completely in the doorway. Standing near the bathroom, fresh from what appeared to be washing his face, was Daniel Foster, her boss, the man whose schedule she managed with military precision, the CEO whose coffee preferences she knew better than her own. And he was standing there in nothing but dress pants, a towel draped around his neck, water droplets still clinging to his bare chest. For 3 excruciating seconds, they both simply stared at each other, mouths slightly open, brains apparently having shut down entirely. Daniel recovered first, grabbing a shirt from the nearby chair with impressive speed. His professional composure, usually so unshakable, had completely vanished, replaced by something Victoria had never seen before. Genuine flustered confusion. When plans collide. Victoria, he stammered, shoving his arms through the sleeves. What are you doing here? She blinked, her organizational mind trying to process this impossible scenario. Room 512, she managed, holding up her keycard like evidence in a trial. The reservation said room 512. Daniel ran his hand through his damp hair, leaving it standing in directions that would have been amusing under any other circumstance. That's impossible. I'm in 512. Look, he gestured around the room at his belongings. His laptop open on the desk, displaying tomorrow's presentation. His briefcase propped against the chair. A framed photograph she couldn't quite see sitting on the nightstand. Victoria stepped fully into the room, letting the heavy door swing shut behind her with a definitive click. The sound seemed to seal them both into this impossible situation. She glanced around, taking in the reality of what was happening. One room, one very large bed. 2 professionals who had maintained perfectly appropriate boundaries for the past 3 years. There must be some mistake, she said, though even as the words left her mouth, she suspected what was coming next. The phone call that sealed their fate? Daniel nodded toward the phone on the desk. Call the front desk. They'll sort this out. Victoria crossed the room, acutely aware of how small the space suddenly felt with both of them in it. She picked up the receiver and dialed 0, her fingers slightly unsteady. A chipper voice answered on the second ring. Good evening. This is Jennifer, at the front desk. How may I assist you? Yes, hello. I'm in room 512, Victoria Hayes. There seems to be a problem with my reservation. There's already someone in this room. There was a pause, the sound of keyboard clicking. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, Miss Hayes. It appears there was a system error during the conference booking. With both the marketing conference and the Wollaston wedding this weekend, we're experiencing unprecedented occupancy. Victoria's stomach sank. So you have another room available. More keyboard clicking, then a longer pause that told Victoria everything she needed to know. I'm terribly sorry, but we're completely booked. In fact, most hotels in a 20-mile radius are fully booked due to the conference. And with the storm system moving in tonight, I wouldn't recommend trying to relocate now. The weather service has issued warnings about flash flooding on the highways. There must be something, Victoria insisted, aware of Daniel watching her intently. His shirt, now buttoned, but still looking decidedly un-CEO-like with his damp hair and bare feet. The only available accommodations I can find are about 35 miles north, near the airport. But with the current weather conditions and traffic reports showing multiple accidents already, I really wouldn't advise attempting that drive tonight. Victoria closed her eyes briefly, processing the impossible situation. I understand. Thank you, she hung up and turned to Daniel, who had clearly deduced the outcome from her expression. Nothing available, she confirmed. Nothing within reasonable distance, especially with the storm coming. As if the universe wanted to emphasize the point, rain suddenly began drumming against the windows, quickly escalating from a gentle patter to a torrential downpour. Lightning flashed across the sky, briefly illuminating Daniel's face, highlighting the concern in his deep brown eyes and the slightly panicked set of his jaw. Negotiating the impossible "I'll sleep in the lobby," Daniel offered immediately, his natural chivalry overriding the awkwardness. "Or my car. There's a parking garage downstairs." Victoria shook her head firmly, her practical nature asserting itself despite the surreal situation. "Don't be ridiculous. You're the CEO. If anyone's sleeping in uncomfortable places, it would be me. Besides, you're giving the keynote tomorrow. You need proper rest." "Absolutely not," Daniel said, his voice taking on that authoritative tone she'd heard him use in boardrooms when negotiations weren't going his way. "I won't allow you to spend the night in a car or lobby chair because of a booking error. That's not acceptable." "Then what exactly do you suggest?" Victoria asked, gesturing toward the elephant in the room, the single king-sized bed that suddenly seemed to dominate the entire space. Daniel looked at the bed, then back at her, then at the bed again. She could practically see his mind working through the logistics. The same analytical approach he used for business problems now applied to their personal dilemma. Before he could formulate an answer, his phone rang from the nightstand. The ringtone was different from his usual professional one, something cheerful and clearly meant for someone specific. Daniel's entire demeanor shifted as he answered, his voice softening in a way Victoria had never heard at the office. "Hey buddy, everything okay?" He listened, a gentle smile crossing his face. "I know, I miss you too. Is Grandma taking good care of you?" Another pause, during which his expression became impossibly tender. "Did she make her famous chocolate chip pancakes for breakfast?" "Lucky kid," he chuckled softly. "Yes, I'll be home in 3 days. Be good for Grandma, okay? I love you more than all the stars in the sky." A revelation that changed everything when he ended the call. Daniel looked at Victoria with an expression mixing embarrassment and pride. "My son, Owen, he's 7. Victoria felt her world tilt slightly on its axis. In 3 years of managing Daniel's life down to the minute, scheduling his meetings, booking his travel, organizing his calendar, she had never known he had a child. How was that possible? "I didn't know you had a son," she said softly. Sitting down on the edge of the bed without thinking, her legs suddenly unsteady. Daniel sat in the desk chair, suddenly looking vulnerable in a way she'd never associated with her confident, commanding boss. "Not many people at the office know. After his mother left, when Owen was 2, I made a decision to keep my personal and professional lives completely separate. It seemed easier, safer for both of us." The revelation hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Suddenly, so many things made sense. The occasional early departures she'd scheduled without question. The way he always took his vacation time during school holidays. The photos she'd glimpsed in his briefcase that he'd never explained. The priority he placed on work-life balance for his employees, even though he seemed to work constantly himself. "That must be incredibly difficult," Victoria said, "balancing everything alone." The conversation that changed everything. Daniel looked down at his hands. Fingers interlaced in a gesture Victoria recognized from difficult client meetings. But this wasn't business. This was personal, raw, and somehow more important than any contract negotiation they'd ever handled together. "It's been challenging," he admitted, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. "After Rachel left, I was completely overwhelmed. Owen was barely talking yet. And suddenly, I was solely responsible for this tiny human while trying to keep the company from falling apart. The only way I could manage was to create walls. Work was work, Owen was everything else. Never the two shall meet. Victoria felt something shift in her chest, a combination of sympathy and admiration. That sounds incredibly lonely. Daniel's eyes met hers, and in them she saw years of carefully concealed exhaustion and sacrifice. It has been, but it felt necessary. Safer for Owen, safer for the company, safer for my heart. The last part slipped out before he could stop it, and Victoria watched as he realized what he'd revealed. The air between them felt charged, electric with unspoken understanding. "What about you?" Daniel asked, clearly wanting to shift focus. 3 years you've been keeping my life organized, and I realize I've never asked about yours. About your dreams, beyond coordinating my chaos. Unveiling hidden truths, Victoria smiled slightly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I've always loved creating order from disorder. There's something satisfying about taking complicated situations and making them work seamlessly. But lately, I've been wondering if there's more I could be doing." "Like what?" Daniel leaned forward, genuinely interested in a way that felt different from their professional interactions. "Strategy work," she confessed, feeling vulnerable, admitting this ambition. "I've been taking online courses in marketing analytics and campaign strategy. Every time I organize your presentations, I find myself analyzing the approaches, thinking about how I might do things differently." Daniel's expression showed surprise mixed with something else. Respect perhaps, or realization. "Why didn't you ever mention this?" "You never asked," Victoria said gently, without accusation. "And honestly, I wasn't sure how you'd react. Would you see it as ambition or presumption? Would it make you think I wasn't satisfied with my current role?" "Are you satisfied?" Daniel asked directly. Victoria considered the question carefully. "I'm grateful for everything I've learned working for you. But yes, I want more. I want to contribute beyond scheduling and coordination." Thunder rumbled outside, and the rain intensified, creating a cocoon of sound around them. Daniel stood and walked to the minibar, pulling out 2 small bottles of whiskey. He held one up questioningly, and Victoria nodded. Liquid courage and honest confessions, they sat on opposite sides of the bed. Business materials spread between them as an excuse for proximity. Sipping whiskey that burned pleasantly, and loosened tongues, usually guarded by professionalism. "Tell me about Owen," Victoria said, genuinely curious about this hidden part of Daniel's life. "What's he like?" Daniel's entire face transformed, lit from within by obvious love. "He's extraordinary. Obsessed with astronomy and dinosaurs, which he insists should be combined into one subject called space dinosaurs. He builds these incredibly complex structures with whatever he can find: blocks, books, furniture. Last week, he constructed an entire space station in the living room using couch cushions and kitchen chairs." Victoria laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. "He sounds creative." "Too creative sometimes," Daniel said, with a fond smile. His teacher called last month because he'd organized the entire class into a space expedition crew during free time, complete with assigned roles and missions. She didn't know whether to be impressed or concerned about his leadership skills emerging so early. "I wonder where he gets that from," Victoria teased. Taking another sip of whiskey, Daniel's laugh was self-deprecating. "His grandma, obviously. I'm the laid-back parent." "Right," Victoria said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "The man who color-codes his calendar and has backup plans for his backup plans is definitely laid back." The photograph's story. Daniel reached for the framed photo on the nightstand, handing it to Victoria. A small boy with Daniel's dark hair and dimpled smile beamed at the camera, missing both front teeth, holding what appeared to be a handmade rocket ship. "This was last summer," Daniel explained, his voice soft with memory. "We went to the Science Museum, and he became obsessed with the space exhibit. He spent 3 weeks building that rocket from cardboard boxes and aluminum foil. It doesn't look like much, but he was so proud." Victoria studied the photo, seeing not just the child, but the devotion evident in how carefully the photo was framed, how Daniel carried it even on business trips. "You're a good father, Daniel." "I try," he said quietly. "Some days I feel like I'm failing at everything. The company needs more time, Owen needs more attention, and I'm constantly stretched too thin. Do you know how many school events I've missed because of client meetings? Do you know how many times I've rearranged your schedule so you could make those events?" Victoria asked gently. Daniel's head snapped up, surprise evident in his eyes. "What?" "The spring concert last year. I moved the Henderson pitch to the morning so you could leave by 2. The father-son breakfast in October. I rescheduled your entire week. The science fair in December. I convinced the Singapore clients that a video conference would be just as effective as flying you out there." Recognition and revelation silence stretched between them as Daniel processed this information. "You did that? All those times?" Victoria shrugged, suddenly feeling exposed. "You never missed an important deadline, and Owen got his dad at his events. It seemed like the right thing to do. Why didn't you tell me?" Daniel's voice was thick with emotion. "Because you would have felt guilty or obligated, and I didn't want that. I did it because I could see how much it mattered, how much he matters to you." She paused, meeting his eyes. "And because somewhere along the way, your success became important to me. Both kinds of success." The confession hung in the air between them, meaning more than just professional support. Daniel set down his empty whiskey bottle and moved closer, the business papers crinkling and shifting between them. "Victoria, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low and serious. "For the past year, maybe longer, I've been aware of you in ways that go beyond professional appreciation. The way you handle difficult clients with such grace, how you anticipate problems before they arise. Your quiet competence that makes everything work. But more than that, the way you smile when you think no one's watching, how you hum quietly when you're concentrating. The kindness you show to everyone from interns to executives." Victoria's heart hammered in her chest. "Daniel, let me finish," he interrupted gently. "I told myself it was inappropriate. That my attraction was something to be managed and suppressed like any other business challenge. But sitting here now, sharing this ridiculous situation, I'm realizing that maybe some things aren't meant to be managed away." The storm within and without lightning flashed again, closer this time, and the lights flickered momentarily. In that brief moment of illumination, Victoria saw Daniel clearly, not as her boss, not as the CEO of a successful company, but as a man who'd been carrying tremendous weight alone, who'd built walls to protect himself and his son, who was now offering her a glimpse behind those walls. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not of you, but of what this means. Office relationships are complicated enough without adding the boss-employee dynamic. What happens if this doesn't work? What happens to my career, my ambitions?" Daniel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm, his grip firm but gentle. "I've thought about that too. Here's what I know, your talent is real. Whether anything happens between us personally or not, you deserve recognition for your abilities. If you want to move into strategy, that conversation happens regardless. Your career path isn't contingent on personal relationships. Can you promise that?" Victoria asked, needing to hear it clearly. "I promise," Daniel said, his eyes holding hers with unwavering sincerity. "And if we explore this, if we try to see what's here beyond professionalism, and it doesn't work out, then we act like the adults we are. No retaliation, no awkwardness that affects business, clean, professional, respectful." Victoria studied his face, searching for any sign of uncertainty or manipulation. She found only honesty and hope. "I've thought about you too," she confessed, her voice gaining strength. "Wondered what it would be like to have a real conversation with you, not just about quarterly reports and client strategies. Wondered about the man behind the title, about what makes you laugh, what keeps you up at night besides spreadsheets." Daniel smiled, genuine and warm. "Mostly, Owen keeps me up at night. He's got this thing where he needs exactly 7 stuffed animals arranged in a specific order before he can sleep. If one is missing or out of place, We start the whole process over. Building bridge. Victoria laughed, the tension easing slightly. That seems very organized for a 7-year-old. He gets it from his father, apparently, Daniel said wryly. Though his grandmother insists he's just high maintenance. They talked for hours, the storm raging outside, while they created their own shelter within the room. Victoria learned about Daniel's college years when he'd worked 3 jobs to stay enrolled, about the failed business ventures before Apex Marketing Solutions, about the moment he'd held Owen for the first time and felt his entire world shift. Daniel learned about Victoria's childhood as the middle child in a chaotic household of 5 siblings, about her broken engagement 3 years ago to a man who couldn't understand her dedication to her work, about her dreams of eventually starting her own consulting firm. Why haven't you? Daniel asked about the consulting dream. Victoria hesitated. Honestly, because I've been learning from you, watching how you handle difficult negotiations, how you build client relationships, how you manage growth without sacrificing quality. I figured a few more years of this education was worth delaying my own venture. You could do it now, Daniel said seriously. You have the skills, the knowledge, the work ethic. Maybe, Victoria agreed, but maybe I'm exactly where I need to be right now. The statement carried weight beyond professional development, and they both felt it. Crossing invisible lines as midnight approached, exhaustion began to creep in, but neither wanted to break. The spell of openness they'd created. Finally, Daniel glanced at the clock. We should probably try to sleep, he said reluctantly. Big day tomorrow. The awkwardness returned as they both looked at the bed, the elephant that had been temporarily forgotten during their conversation. Right side, okay for you? Daniel asked, his voice carefully neutral. That's fine, Victoria agreed, heading to the bathroom to change. When she emerged in an oversized sleep shirt, Daniel was already under the covers on the left side, wearing a plain tee, his eyes on his phone. Owen's goodnight message, he explained, showing her the screen. A photo of a pillow fort with a small hand giving a thumbs up from inside. Our nightly ritual, even when I'm traveling. Victoria smiled, touched by the glimpse into their routine. She slipped under the covers on her side. Maintaining a respectful distance, they lay in the darkness, listening to the rain, acutely aware of each other's presence. Finally, Daniel spoke into the darkness. Thank you for tonight. For understanding about Owen, for listening, for being you. Thank you for trusting me enough to share all of that, Victoria responded. Silence fell again, but it felt comfortable now, companionable rather than awkward. Victoria, Daniel's voice was soft, uncertain. Yes. Would you be willing to meet Owen this weekend? Nothing formal or complicated, maybe the planetarium. He's been asking to go, and I think he'd like you. Victoria's heart swelled at the invitation, understanding what it meant that Daniel wanted to include her in that precious part of his life. I'd love that. In the darkness, she felt Daniel's hand find hers under the covers, their fingers intertwining naturally. Sleep well, he whispered. You too, she replied, already feeling sleep pulling at her, despite the racing of her heart. Morning light and new perspectives. Victoria woke slowly, consciousness returning in pieces. Warmth surrounded her, a steady heartbeat beneath her ear, the scent of cedar and something uniquely masculine. For a blissful moment, she simply existed in that comfortable space between sleeping and waking. Then reality crashed in. She was curled against Daniel's side, her head on his shoulder, one arm draped across his chest. His arm was around her, holding her close, his fingers resting gently on her hip. At some point during the night, they'd gravitated toward each other, bodies seeking comfort and connection while their conscious minds slept. Victoria held perfectly still, simultaneously wanting to preserve this moment and terrified of the implications. She could feel Daniel's breathing, slow and even, suggesting he was still asleep. Carefully, she began to extract herself, trying not to wake him. His arm tightened slightly, and his voice, rough with sleep, rumbled in his chest. Don't go yet, Daniel. She started. I know, he said softly. Just another minute. So they lay there, the morning light filtering through the curtains, rain still pattering gently against the windows. The storm having passed its violent peak during the night. It felt surreal, intimate, in a way that went beyond physical proximity. The reality of finally Victoria did pull away, sitting up and immediately missing the warmth. Daniel opened his eyes, looking at her with an expression that mixed contentment and concern. "Good morning," he said, his voice still carrying that morning roughness that did things to Victoria's composure. "Morning," she replied, suddenly shy, tucking her hair behind her ears. "That was nice," Daniel finished. "That was nice. Is that okay to say?" Victoria smiled despite her nervousness. "It's okay to say." They moved through their morning routines with a new awareness, a dance of careful politeness mixed with lingering glances. The bathroom became neutral territory, taking turns, averting eyes when necessary. But the awkwardness from the previous night had transformed into something else. Anticipation, perhaps, or possibility. The conference performance, the marketing conference, was held in the hotel's grand ballroom, and Victoria slipped into her professional persona with practiced ease. She'd chosen a navy suit that projected confidence and capability. Her hair pulled back in a sleek style, minimal makeup highlighting her natural features. As she set up the presentation materials, she was acutely aware of Daniel across the room, equally professional in his charcoal suit, greeting early arrivals with his characteristic charm. When their eyes met across the ballroom, something electric passed between them, a shared secret, a connection that no one else could see. Then they both looked away, focusing on their respective tasks. Daniel's keynote presentation was brilliant, as Victoria had known it would be. He commanded the stage with confidence. His insights into marketing trends both innovative and practical. His delivery engaging and dynamic. Victoria watched from the side of the ballroom, filled with professional pride and something newer, admiration for the complete person she was discovering he was. Throughout the day, they maintained perfect professionalism, colleagues collaborating seamlessly, but underneath ran an undercurrent of awareness, hands brushing as they exchanged materials, lingering glances when they thought no one was watching, the occasional smile that held private meaning. The invitation by late afternoon, the conference had concluded successfully. Several potential clients had expressed serious interest, and their company's reputation had been significantly enhanced. As they packed up materials in the now empty ballroom, Daniel moved closer to Victoria. "That went well," he said, his voice neutral enough for any observers, but his eyes holding warmth meant only for her. "You were exceptional," Victoria replied professionally. Though her smile was softer than usual, Daniel glanced around, confirming they were essentially alone. "Victoria, I meant what I said last night. About dinner, about wanting to explore this properly. Would you have dinner with me tonight? Not to discuss business, not as boss and assistant, just as Daniel and Victoria." Victoria's heart raced, but she kept her expression calm. "I'd like that very much. 7 o'clock. There's an Italian restaurant a few blocks away that's supposed to be excellent." 7 o'clock, Victoria confirmed. The date that wasn't about business. Victoria changed into a simple black dress, the only non-business outfit she'd packed, and spent more time on her appearance than she'd admit. When Daniel knocked on her door, he'd transformed from CEO to simply a man preparing for a date. Dark jeans that fit him perfectly, a blue button-down shirt that made his eyes seem deeper, his hair slightly less perfectly styled than usual. "You look beautiful," he said, his appreciation evident and sincere. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Victoria replied, grabbing her small purse. The restaurant was intimate without being overtly romantic. Exposed brick walls, candlelight, the scent of garlic and fresh bread. They were seated at a corner table, offering privacy while overlooking the city street outside. Conversation flowed naturally, building on the foundation they'd established the night before. Daniel told her about Owen's latest obsession with black holes, demonstrating with exaggerated gestures how his son had tried to explain gravitational pull using a basketball and tennis ball. which had resulted in a broken lamp and a very apologetic 7-year-old. Victoria shared stories from her chaotic childhood, like the time her siblings had decided to help with laundry and turned all their father's white shirts pink, or when they'd attempted to surprise their mother with breakfast in bed and somehow set off the smoke alarm at 6 in the morning. Deeper waters as dinner progressed. The conversation turned more serious. Daniel reached across the table, taking Victoria's hand in his thigh knee. "You need you to understand something," he said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Owen is the center of my world. Anyone who becomes part of my life eventually becomes part of his. I don't introduce him to people casually. If we pursue this, if we explore what's happening between us, it means I'm serious about you." Victoria squeezed his hand. "I understand that, and it matters to me that you're such a devoted father. It says something important about who you are." "What happens Monday?" Daniel asked. "When we go back to the office?" "We're careful," Victoria said thoughtfully. "We don't advertise, but we don't hide either. We focus on proving that we can maintain professionalism regardless of personal connection. And we take things slowly, figure out what this is before making any public announcements." Daniel nodded, clearly having thought through similar concerns. "And your career advancement?" "I meant what I said about moving you into strategy. That happens because you've earned it. Not because of this." He gestured between them. "I believe you," Victoria said simply. After dinner, they walked through the city streets. The earlier storm having left everything fresh and clean, the air cool and pleasant. Daniel took her hand naturally, as if they'd been doing this for years rather than hours. They paused on a small bridge overlooking a canal. City lights reflecting in the dark water below. Daniel turned to face her, his expression serious. "I've been attracted to you for longer than I'd admitted to myself," he confessed. "Watching you work, seeing how you handle pressure, your integrity, your competence, but more than that, the small things. How you bite your lip when you're concentrating. The way you champion the interns, your ridiculous optimism even during difficult projects." The kiss that changed everything. Victoria felt her breath catch. "I've wondered about you too. About the person behind the professional mask. I'm glad I got to see him." Daniel reached up, cupping her face gently. "Can I kiss?"